let's talk a bit about jokes, because he's using a lot of jokes in his talk. A joke is something that we have a certain expectation and the expectation doesn't come true. Hello, my name is Esmeralda Klein-Racing. I'm the pitch coach in the Netherlands, and I help you improve your public speaking skills by analyzing TED Talks and showing what works and what doesn't. This time we're going to look at Dan Pink's The Puzzle of Motivation. Enjoy.
I need to make a
That is normally a very bad start. This is called self-soothing gestures, and it indicates that you are very nervous and trying to get some of that nerves back by petting yourself. An alternative is doing this or going through your hair or something like that. And an audience will feel a bit uncomfortable looking at that, because unconsciously they will feel there is somebody on stage who is stressed, who's nervous, so there is apparently some kind of danger, and that means that I have to be careful as well. So they are not as relaxed as they can, and we need them relaxed in order to get our message across. So normally I would say this is not a very good start. However, in this case, he is going to make a confession, and it is not unusual to feel nervous about that. Actually, it is a functional gesture. You could see it as a functional gesture showing that you are nervous. So let's see if that's the case here.
Confession at the outset here. A little over 20 years ago, I did something that I regret, something that I'm not particularly proud of, something that in many ways I wish no one would ever know.
So he's building up the tension. He's going to say something that makes him nervous, and he's going to confess, and we feel the tension rising, so we're on the edge of a seat. Very good way of engaging your audience when you start.
But that here I feel kind of obliged to reveal. In the late 1980s, in a moment of youthful indiscretion, I went to law school.
And now he suddenly opens up with his hands. It's just slightly, but he opens up. Before, he actually blocked himself off from the audience, probably not as a functional gesture, but just because he's nervous. And now he's opening up, and he's literally opening up saying his self-deprecating joke.
Now,
and the audience laughs. Very good.
In America, law is a professional degree. You get your university degree, then you go on to law school.
Ooh, what he does very good is, and we're going to see this again and again and again in this TED Talk, is he makes use of a timeline. And a timeline goes for an audience who speaks English or most Western languages, goes from left to right, because we read from left to right. That's different for instance, people who read Arabic, they read from right to left, so they expect a timeline to go from right to left. But this audience is English language audience, timeline from left to right, so he makes a gesture. He starts a university degree, and then he went on to law school. Very logical. But do remember, this is a really advanced technique. For you as a speaker, it is not natural to do it that way, because you have to do it starting from your right hand side, being the starting point, going to your left hand side. So that is something you really, really need to practice in order to do it properly, using a timeline in a mirrored fashion.
When I got to law school, I didn't do very well. To put it mildly, I didn't do very well. I, in fact, graduated in the part of my law school class that made the top 90% possible.
If you show that you can laugh about yourself and that the audience is allowed to laugh about themselves, you can make more jokes, and you can make jokes about the audience as well. So that's a very good start. So he will get a laugh from that.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, take a look at this. This is called the candle problem.
This is a very good way of using illustrations. Don't just use PowerPoint for the use of PowerPoint, but only use PowerPoints when you can add value by giving some visual information. And that's what he's doing here. He's going to describe what's called the candle problem, and everything you need to know about the candle problem you see immediately when you look at this. What's also good is he hasn't written it out. He just has one title, the candle problem, and he reads that very quickly. Important because we as an audience are not able to read and listen. So as soon as you put text on a PowerPoint, we're gone. We're distracted.
And eventually, after 5 or 10 minutes, most people figure out the solution, which you can see here.
Wonderful. Just this picture gives a lot of additional information. Just showing the picture means that you don't have to explain the solution anymore.
He gathered his participants and he said, I'm going to time you how quickly you can solve this problem. To one group, he said, I'm going to time you to establish norms, averages for how long it typically takes someone to solve this sort of problem. To the second group, he offered rewards.
What he's doing very well is use the space on a podium to give some extra information to his audience. Probably it helps him as well to remember his speech. He's standing on our right to look at one group, and then he moves to the other group who does something different on the left-hand side.
He said, if you're in the top 25% of the fastest times, you get $5. If you're the fastest of everyone we're testing here today, you get $20. Okay, now this is several years ago, adjusted for inflation. It's a decent sum of money for a few minutes of work. Okay, it's a nice motivator. Question, how much faster did this group solve the problem? Answer, it took them on average 3.5 minutes longer.
That is an excellent way of using silence. 3.5 minutes, and then he breaks for a moment, so he gives you time to compose an answer in your head. And the logical answer is, well, they're getting an incentive, so 3.5 minutes faster. And what he says instead is it took them longer. So that makes it very surprising. And he adds to that by emphasizing the word longer. So that's a tip you can use always. If you want to emphasize something, bit of a break, and then emphasize the word itself.
3.5 minutes longer. Now, this makes no sense, right? I mean, I'm an American. I believe in free markets. That's not how it's supposed to work, right?
What he does here, and he does it very well, is get an emotion on. He is truly upset by this, and because he's truly upset by it, it is very easy for him, as an American who believes in the free market economy, to not even play being angry on stage, but actually activate that anger that he really feels. And what he does then is everything fits. The way he looks, what he does with his mouth, what he does with his hands. He doesn't have to act it, it just comes out. And it makes us as an audience, it makes it easy to connect with you, because we all have these feelings. We all have feelings of anger.
And what's interesting about this experiment is that it's not an aberration. This has been replicated over and over and over again for nearly 40 years.
Beautiful use of the rule of 3. If you really want to emphasize it, you can just repeat something. But how often do you repeat it? Well, the rule of 3 says that when you do something in 3, people feel that that is all there is to say. So doing it over and over and over again is sufficient. If you do it 4, it's too much. If you do it twice, it's not as efficient, it's not as effective, but doing it 3 times over and over and over again with, once again, a functional gesture showing what over and over and over means, that is a very good way of getting that across.
These contingent motivators, if you do this, then you get that, work in some circumstances.
You saw him do the left-right timeline. If you do this, then you do that. Perfectly executed once again. Start of a process, end of a process, on a line. Well done. And mirrored for the audience, not for himself.
But I spent the last couple of years looking at the science of human motivation, particularly the dynamics of extrinsic motivators and intrinsic motivators.
If I want to give him a tip, this is one. It's about not using difficult words. He uses extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. Everybody who's had a social science class 101 knows what the difference is, but you cannot assume that everybody in a TED Talk audience, which can be thousands, tens of thousands, millions even, knows what those words mean. And if you use difficult words, people are no longer relaxed. The dopamine doesn't give them, they don't get that dopamine hit, which rewards them for being in a pleasant environment and rewards them to listen to you. So if you want to use those kind of technical terms, not a problem, but you need to define them immediately. And he doesn't do that. So that would be something I would advise him to change.
And I'm telling you, it's not even close. If you look at the science, there is a mismatch between what science knows and what business does.
Excellent use of text on a PowerPoint. As I said before, try not to use text on a PowerPoint, but if you do, read it immediately, literally the way it stands. And that's what he's doing here. Fantastic.
How we motivate people, how we apply our human resources. It's built entirely around these extrinsic motivators, around carrots and sticks.
And now he defines extrinsic motivators, and he defines it very clearly, very quickly, rewards around carrots and sticks. That is a fantastic definition.
That's actually fine for many kinds of 20th century tasks. But for 21st century tasks, that mechanistic reward and punishment approach doesn't work, often doesn't work, and often does harm.
Try to scrape words like never, always, everyone from your vocabulary when you're speaking, because it will exclude situations and it will exclude persons. So that was a very good correction that he made from always to often. And he even turns to that incentivized group corner on the stage and he leans into them. So it's very clear that there is the incentive part of the stage. Well done.
Why? Because when the tacks are out of the box, it's pretty easy, isn't it?
Excellent. Excellent use of same picture, but now adding some text and you don't have to explain anything anymore.
If-then rewards work really well for those sorts of tasks, where there's a simple set of rules and a clear destination to go to. Rewards, by their very nature, narrow our focus, concentrate the mind. That's why they work in so many cases. And so for tasks like this, a narrowed focus where you just see the goal right there, zoom straight ahead to it, they work really well.
I really like how he explains and he uses his hands to explain what he's telling. It's about focusing on narrowing, and he uses his hands, he uses all his body language to talk about narrowing and focus. So the message comes across really well.
But for the real candle problem, you don't want to be looking like this. The solution's not over here. The solution's on the periphery. You want to be looking around. That reward actually narrows.
And you see how he uses the periphery. It's a big gesture, and he looks around instead of looking just straight ahead. Very nice use of his whole body. That's what I call body learning.
In Western Europe, in many parts of Asia, in North America, in Australia.
If I were to make his TED Talk, which looks really good, even better, just by a smidge, I would say to him, well, you're working really nicely with your hands. You're indicating, you're talking about North America, Australia, Europe. Why not indicate that on a map? In the same way you're doing that on a timeline, so you could say North America, Australia, Europe.
Now, I mean, it makes me crazy. And this is not, here's the thing, this is not a feeling.
Of course it is a feeling. And it is clear that it's making him crazy. He's using his hands, he's overusing his hands almost. So he's showing this problem by means of his emotions. He was angry before, now he's acting crazy because that is what he feels like. And we understand that. We're all human, so we understand those kind of emotions. And use them on a stage because it makes it easier to connect with you, easier to understand what you're doing.
Okay, I'm a lawyer. I don't believe in feelings. This is not a philosophy. I'm an American. I don't believe in philosophy.
Let's talk a bit about jokes because he's using a lot of jokes in his talk. A joke is something that we have a certain expectation and the expectation doesn't come true. And because the expectation doesn't come true, we laugh. That's basically how Craig Dean, if you ever want to learn anything about jokes, buy Craig Dean's book. What Craig Dean tells you is a joke. Expectation doesn't come true. And therefore, he can use this as a joke. The expectation is we as Americans, we don't like socialism, we don't like philosophy, we like the free market economy. So what science says can't be true. How does that work? It's a good way of dealing with objections that people may have. And he does it in a joking way. So we can laugh about it, but the undertone, the message underneath it is very serious. It's my culture does not fit with what science says. Our culture does not fit with what science says. And that makes me feel uncomfortable. And that's why we laugh about it.
Dan Ariely, one of the great economists of our time, he and 3 colleagues did a study with some MIT students. They gave these MIT students a bunch of games that involved creativity and motor skills and concentration. And they offered them for performance 3 levels of rewards. Small reward, medium reward, large reward.
So we're back to the rule of 3. Now, small, medium, large. Scientists use that as well because if we do things in 3, we have the feeling that we're complete. And he nicely indicates with his hands the 3 kind of rewards, giving us an extra level of information.
In 8 of the 9 tasks we examined across 3 experiments, higher incentives led to worse performance. Is this some kind of touchy-feely socialist conspiracy going on here? No, these are economists from MIT.
So once again, this underlying message that he wants to get across, that yes, these results are not according to our traditions, not according to our culture, they're counterintuitive, but they are real, he gets across really strongly here.
From Carnegie Mellon, from the University of Chicago. And do you know who sponsored this research? The Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. That's the American experience. Let's go across the pond to the London School of Economics. LSE, London School of Economics, alma mater of 11 Nobel laureates in economics.
I personally would have done slightly different. I would have started with the London one, which is the non-American one, and then say, well, London, Europe, maybe more socialists, but we in America definitely will not get those kind of results, will we? So the Federal Reserve Bank, and then go from there. So build it up, and then the fall for the Americans is even greater.
Training ground for great economic thinkers like George Soros and Friedrich Hayek and Mick Jagger.
This is what Craig Dean means with expectations not coming through, making a joke. What he does is London School of Economics. He mentioned 2 names of people we assume are economic professors or something like that. Many people probably won't know them. So he sets up a pattern, and the expectation is that he's going to mention another 3rd name of an economist. And instead, what he does is he mentions an other alumni, Mick Jagger. which is an entertainer that everybody will know. So hence we laugh, because there was an expectation and it doesn't come true. And it's a good laugh.
Last month, we needed a whole new approach. The good news about all this is that the scientists who've been studying motivation have given us this new approach. It's an approach built much more around intrinsic motivation, around the desire to do things because they matter, because we like it, because they're interesting, because they're part of something important.
Only now he gives a definition of what the intrinsic motivation is. And you might have noticed that you thought it was a bit long, this definition. And why is that? That is because he doesn't obey the rule of three, but he mentions four things. Because we reward it, because we like it, because they're interesting, because they're part of something important. So I would say just cut one of them out. But once again, this is a very good and very quick definition of a difficult word, in this case, intrinsic motivation.
And to my mind, that new operating system for our businesses revolves around three elements: autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Three elements. Obviously, if you want to get something across, do it in three. That's what he's going to do. And notice that he was very, very big and energetic, and the problem that he had was huge, and there were huge gestures, and there was crazy emotions and anger. And now he's getting to the solution, and all of a sudden he settles down. His gestures will settle down. His tone of voice will settle down. His energy. So he goes from problem to solution. And he'll get us relaxed again. We're relaxed. So now we're open to his solution. Let's look at how he does
Autonomy, the urge to direct our own lives. Mastery, the desire.
Look at that. His left arm is down. He's not even moving. His right arm is no longer here, but is a lot lower. He's standing straight instead of just pushing, trying to push things through. This is very consciously done, and excellent way of using your body.
Desire to get better and better at something that matters. Let me give you some examples. How many of you have heard of the company Atlassian? Okay, it looks like less than half.
Nobody responded, as we could see. We could hear that. So this is absolutely way too much credit, and the audience knows, and there is laughter again.
Atlassian.
Because we expected him to say nobody, and instead he says, well, less than half.
In the mid-1990s, Microsoft started an encyclopedia called Encarta. They had deployed all the right incentives. They paid professionals to write and edit thousands of articles. Well-compensated managers oversaw the whole thing to make sure it came in on budget and on time. A few years later, another encyclopedia.
Very good. So he's given an example of the extrinsic motivation. So where he has taken the left side of the podium. Very good example. We probably know about it. And then he says, and there is another one. And he moves to the right-hand side. That is the right-hand side, the internal motivation, intrinsic motivation side. And he describes a company building an encyclopedia. And listen to how he describes it and see if you know what company he describes.
That started. Different model, right? Do it for fun. No one gets paid a cent or a euro or a yen. Do it because you like to do it. Now, if you had, just 10 years ago, if you had gone to an economist anywhere and said, hey, I got these two different models for creating an encyclopedia. If they went head to head, who would win? 10 years ago, you could not have found a single sober economist anywhere on planet Earth who would have predicted the Wikipedia model.
You probably guessed that was Wikipedia. And this is what in Hollywood is called show, don't tell. Your audience will feel really smart if they figure something out for themselves. And just mentioning that model, you can expect almost everybody to know Wikipedia and the Wikipedia model for an encyclopedia. So we feel smart because we know what he's talking about. And it is a very good example of the intrinsic and the extrinsic motivation model for something that we definitely know.
This is the titanic battle between these two approaches. This is the Ali Frazier of motivation, right? This is the thriller in Manila, all right? Intrinsic motivators versus extrinsic motivators. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose versus carrots and sticks. And who wins?
Wonderful use of the stage. You keep seeing him pointing to the direction where he has staged those two opposites.
Intrinsic motivation, autonomy, mastery, and purpose in a knockout. Let me wrap up.
That is a very good way of ending your speech. Very clearly indicating this is where we are in the structure, and we're now in the last part of the structure. I'm going to give you something that you need, the information that you need. I have given you all the information you needed, and now I'm going to summarize it, and you can go away with an idea that will really help you. We know that that happens when he says, I'm going to wrap up. So this is the moment we can sit up again, have extra energy in listening to that last bit of information he's going to give. And he not only says it, but he also gives a break, and he even looks down. The looking down means that there is no contact with the audience anymore, so we know there is a new phase, and that looking down makes us think that he is thinking about what he's going to say. So everything is congruent with the idea of we're going into a new phase in this presentation.
There's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does, and here's what science knows. 1, those 20th century rewards, those motivators we think are the natural part of business, do work, but only in a surprisingly narrow band of circumstances. 2, those if-then rewards often destroy creativity. 3, the secret to high performance isn't rewards and punishments, but that unseen intrinsic drive, the drive to do things for their own sake, the drive to do things because they matter. And
what I would have loved for him to see is that third point, which is about extrinsic motivation, for him to do that not with his left hand, but to make the 3 over there, or to make some kind of gesture to that side, just to be completely congruent with the rest of his talk.
Here's the best part. Here's the best part. We already know this. The science confirms what we know in our hearts. So, if we repair this mismatch between what science knows and what business does, if we bring our motivation, notions of motivation, into the 21st century, if we get past this lazy, dangerous ideology of carrots and sticks, we can strengthen our businesses.
Ooh, and now he stands on the wrong side. Strengthen our businesses. You should do that there, not over here.
We can solve a lot of those candle problems.
Yes, that's the
and
right
maybe we can change the world.
Ooh, what a beautiful image to give to people. We can change the world. We can change the world by using what science has taught us, by changing businesses. We can change the world. That is a beautiful story to give to your audience. Fantastic. Fantastic ending. So now we're going to see if he will accept the applause that he will get, because he will get a lot of applause because this was a really good TED Talk.
I rest my case.
Oh, and he walks off. That if I can give him one more tip, and I can give you one more tip. If you've given a really good TED Talk or speech or pitch, stay there for your audience. Your audience wants to reward you, and they reward you by clapping. Give them the satisfaction of you listening to them clapping. Don't think, I'm so relieved, it's over, it went okay, let's go off stage. No, stay there, wait a minute, breathe, look at your audience, maybe make a bow, and then leave the stage. That's a courtesy to the audience and to yourself. Wil jij als directeur, ondernemer of topprofessional met 1-op-1 maatwerk een perfecte pitch creëren en razendsnel inspireren en overtuigen? Boek dan gelijk een vrijblijvend kennismakingsgesprek op www.thepitchcoach.nl/contact. Tot binnenkort!